Hello again, economics students. So remember in the last video we looked at how the market allocates our scarce resources, land, labour and capital, and we looked at the role of relative prices in this process. We said relative prices is just the price of one particular good or service compared to another, and suppliers are going to allocate more resources to goods or services that have a higher relative price because of their profit motive. Another key point was that relative prices can change without the actual underlying price or the price of that particular good or service changing, okay, which becomes more important when we start comparing different markets. Now remember that when a market is in equilibrium, price and quantity remain constant, there's no pressure to change, and therefore there'll be no change in resource allocation or price or quantity. However, we know that demand and supply do change constantly all the time, and therefore there'll be a change in price and therefore a change in the resource allocation. So in this video, we're going to step out that process, and hopefully you'll be able to do that in a SAT question or in an exam question. We're going to start by looking at a change in demand and how that will affect resource allocation, because I think that's the easiest way to do it. So remember, an increase or decrease in demand, suppliers are going to respond, and there's going to be a change in resource allocation. So let's have a look. So first of all here, I'm going to call this the market for gas again, and naughty me, I didn't label my market. And we can see that there's been a shift to the right in the demand curve, right? And maybe this is because, if this is the market for gas, maybe this is because, just to throw some extra confusion in there, maybe this is because the price of coal has increased. Coal is a substitute that they burn to create energy. So if coal prices are skyrocketing, producers of energy will demand more gas. But it doesn't matter why. We've just got a shift to the right in the demand curve. Okay? And so we're going to go through this 4-step process here. First of all, a shift in the demand curve to the right. Now I'm doing this with my mouse, so I'm not going to write it fully, but you get the picture. Okay, now we need to think, does this create a shortage or a surplus? And here we're going to use the skills that we learned in the last video, where we looked at how a market moves from one equilibrium to another. So we're going to draw a line from the current equilibrium price, which should have been labelled, naughty me, across and work out where we intersect with the supply curve, the original supply curve, and the new demand curve, D1. Okay, and what we're going to see is that if we trace this down, I'm going to need my pen here, if we trace this down, quantity supplied is here, and quantity demanded is over here. So again, this will mean that quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, which means we have a shortage. All right. Now, we know this. We don't necessarily need to go too deep into this process when we're doing resource allocation, but it helps us. We know that then suppliers will respond by raising prices because they're going to notice the shortage, or in some markets, consumers will bid up the price. Doesn't necessarily matter in this process which happens first or why. We just need to know that the price starts to rise. Yeah, a shortage will put pressure on prices. Prices will start to increase. Now, if the price of gas starts to increase, the price of gas compared to other goods and services has increased. So the relative price of gas has increased. Okay. Now we know, because as we said at the start of this video, that if the relative price increases, then that will lead to more resources being allocated to this particular market. And this is what happened in Australia. The price of gas increases, mining companies start to go, well, maybe we allocate more resources towards gas and less towards other commodities. And remember, that just means more labour, more equipment, more of their land towards producing this particular product. Okay, so the high price sends a signal to those producers that, hey, there's a shortage in this market, and in order to clear that shortage and for you to make a profit, you should allocate more resources to this market. Okay, and remember, there's an expansion along the supply curve, a contraction along the demand curve, and the shortage is cleared. And we have a new equilibrium quantity and a new equilibrium price here. Now the key, as I said before, the trick is to see that if there's an increase in quantity traded, as a result of a shift in the demand curve, that just means more resources are being allocated to this market. So a little quick trick is to see if the demand curve is driving this change and there's an increase in quantity, that means more resources. It's different for supply, but we'll do that in the next video. Okay, so the 4 steps are there, and I want